broadcasting here from the edge of empire, um, the edge of the empire, of the American empire. Um, it's really bewildering to see how people react to reality. When reality hits them, they react according to how they were pre-programmed. So in this case, the number one topic in Romania and probably in Europe in general is the fact that there was this Moldovan election and a referendum regarding accession to the European Union, and it narrowly failed. I mean, okay, from a strictly legal point of view, it passed by a very small margin, less than a percentage point. But if you take into account the fact that the Russian side, the pro-Russian side or the anti-EU side had a mixed strategy, some parties advocated for a boycott of the referendum, and there were quite a lot of people who did not participate in order for the referendum not to pass the 50% threshold, which in the end it did. So it passed like narrowly, it had like 53% participation rate, turnout rate. Um, so yeah, some of the opponents of EU accession wanted to boycott it, and some other ones wanted to show up and vote no. So in the end, we have this mixed situation in which a bit more than half of the electorate showed up and voted, and among them, a bit more than half, a very, very, very small margin, less than a percentage point, voted for. So yeah, okay, from a strictly legal point of view, you could say that the referendum was successful and the majority of the people voted for EU accession. However, there is more to the story. Because, of course, the referendum was organized by the pro-EU government of Maia Sandu, who was also seeking re-election, running for a second term. And the way her last 4 years, so her first term, uh, was carried out was through political repression, mass political repression. Basically, everybody from the opposition was at some point or another arrested, including her second round adversary, and several political parties were banned. Um, Quite a lot of media outlets that were opposing her were also banned, and the referendum was organized in such a way so as to maximize the yes vote. So they opened a lot of polling stations in Western Europe, and they opened only two in Russia over the whole territory of Russia, both of them in Moscow, and they only gave 10,000 ballots to these two polling stations. So you can imagine there are hundreds of thousands of Moldovans living in Russia, and they only received 10,000 ballots to express their vote. Um, there were long queues in Moscow, of course. Uh, people waited for hours. Of course, only a fraction of them could vote. They, in the end, made some singing and dancing, and they threw some sort of a street party there in front of the consulate for not being able to vote. But of course, these images were not broadcast in the West, because the image that needed to be broadcast was that of Maia Sandu, the incumbent, coming at 2 a.m. When there was still a pretty slim chance of a yes victory in the referendum, coming out to accuse this huge fraud perpetrated by Russia, saying that 300,000 votes were bought, and that she will see what needs to be done in that case. In the end, of course, because the yes vote won by a very, very small margin, the whole fraud story got covered up. Now it is no longer relevant, but this was the initial reaction. This is how the pro-European forces wanted to approach the problem. Uh, And what is most bewildering is to see how people react to this. Of course, it is quite stunning to see that the poorest country in Europe was asked in a referendum if it wants to join the European Union, and the answer was almost a no. So of course it does send shockwaves. It doesn't really matter that in the end 25% of the people chose for the entire country and made up a legally valid referendum in the end. Uh, the the signal was sent, so the European elites got the idea that there's not that much enthusiasm to join the European Union from its most likely candidate, from the poorest country in Europe. So you can imagine if the poorest country in Europe barely wants to join the European Union, there is something rotten in Denmark, as Shakespeare used to say. So, but of course, this is not the story that the pro-European elites are propagating in Romania. In Romania, the mainstream discourse among the so-called educated public, so the people who watch the news and who take their opinions from the opinion makers, from the guaranteed opinion makers, um, they have this fraud story on their minds. Russia bought up a huge part of the electorate. The other part of the electorate is just made of Soviet nostalgics. So there's apparently quite a lot of Soviet nostalgia 35 years after the year in which the Iron Curtain collapsed. How likely is this? I'll let you decide. But yeah, this is the standard story because they will not admit that they're retarded and that they have nothing more to offer, that they're bankrupting themselves, and that the other side of the world is winning, the side that is now gathered in the BRICS Kazan Forum in Tatarstan in Russia. They will not admit that the world is changing and that they're becoming less and less relevant. So they're just trying to rosy up the picture through all of these allegations, all of these unsubstantiated allegations that most of the Moldovans were either bought, they were paid by Putin to vote no, or that they are some sort of cretins who just want the Soviet Union back. Tony Grasunu, thanks a lot for your comment. It was lovely to see how they've changed the narrative in real time. When they saw the result within Moldova, they started calling Moldovans many names. Yes, that's very true. So I was watching when the map of Moldova was painted red. I think red was the color of no and blue was the color of yes. So it was painted red, apart from Chisinau and 4 other regions. And the reaction of the people from around Maya Sandu and from the pro-Moldovan civil society was that, yeah, we should deport all of these no voters to Siberia, we should confiscate their passports. Funny to see how democracy works, but it was no surprise for me because I've been around in these years, like 2021, as they were saying, the same camp, the same pro-democracy, pro-Western liberal camp. They were saying, okay, who doesn't take the vaccine, we should put them, we should also send them to some gulag of some sort. Hello, Elena Tanasuk, welcome to my channel. I've been broadcasting for some time now, so welcome. So yeah, it's very hard to convince these people that the world that they grew up in no longer exists. This discourse that they're having is very good for the 90s. This is when they developed it actually. Maybe for the 2000s, but ever since 2016, China has become the biggest economy in the world. Russia has been growing incessantly ever since the war. It's now the fourth economy on this planet after China, the United States, and India. We're no longer living in that universe in which America is the hegemon. It is the bastion of democracy, so-called. It never was, but it was at some point strong enough to impose this narrative. We no longer live in that world, but just like in that movie Goodbye Lenin, when you have that old lady from the German Democratic Republic who could not accept the fact that the Iron Curtain fell and that there are all these changes coming. So the people around her had to curate her environment to make it seem that the communism was still there. The same thing is happening with these people. They're completely delusional, and they have to maintain their illusion somehow that America is the number one power, that the European Union is the best club to enter, the number one economic force, and so on, the bastion of democracy. So yeah, this is on the one hand it's amusing, on the other hand it's rather depressing, because of course you cannot move to some other reality when you have this environment around you. You cannot make steps to accustom yourself to adapt to this new environment when you're just blocked in these old cliches. You see this very strong signal: the hungriest country of Europe is voting against the European Union, so apparently it is voting against going to lunch, and still people cannot understand this. They go with all of these myths about the dragon Putin bribing everybody. So yeah, this is what I wanted to tell you today. Stick around and I'll give you some more material about the multipolar world that we are entering, and see you in the next episode. Bye.